my own, perhaps, reasons for credibility is that Baruch Hashem, and the story will be told over probably a couple of times over this weekend, Bez Hashem. We had a kip, and Baruch Hashem we call her a quip, a kid who, Baruch Hashem, was in pain. So the W is was in pain. And B'siyata D'Shmaya, Baruch Hashem, it's already almost, Baruch Hashem, at least 3 or 4 years since Baruch Hashem things turned around, and Chasti Hashem, she's married, and amazing, they spent Yantav with us, and it's incredible just to see the Yeshua. So on one end, I lived this journey, and it's a continuous journey. On the other hand, my profession, by what I do as a living, is I'm a menal. So I see both sides, and if I hope that I can bring some clarity to this issue. And what I find is, many times, is that as parents we're very, very frustrated because we understand our child and we know intimately what's going on with that child. And a lot of times we feel that the Hanhala, whether it's a Menahel, Menahelis, whether it's a Mora, whether it's a Rebbe, are not getting it. And they're missing the point. So, I think that a lot of times it's easy for us to say, this is why my child is suffering, this is my child is not succeeding in school, and I think we need to go ahead and say, okay, what are we going to do about it? So, the first thing I think we have to understand is, I always considered myself a menahel who was always championing the underdog. And sometimes I got a lot of flack for that because I was always the one that the child that would get sent out of class, I was always his advocate, or her, in what case I have Talmidim, not Talmidos. So I always thought that I got it. That's what I always thought. But until you have a child that's going through what these children go through, you don't really get it. So I think the first thing we have to understand is whether it's a menahel or menahelis, whether it's a mora or a rebbe, they may be the nicest, sweetest people, but they don't get it. They just don't understand. And all the explanations we're going to tell them will only get them so far. I didn't get it. I thought I did, but I didn't get it. Now I feel like I get it. And Baruch Hashem, I have a whole different approach to chinuch than I had before. So once we get that, I think we can take a step back and deal with it differently. It's a different mahalach in chinuch. I mean, I think we ourselves can attest to that. Did any of us get it before we got it? We didn't. It's called twisted parenting for a reason, right? It's twisted. Once you understand it, and it's successful, there is no other language. And anyone else is crazy, and we're normal. But from their perspective, we're crazy, we know better. But they don't. And Baruch Hashem, they should never know that. I think the most important thing we can do is communicate. And sometimes we can do that, and I'll say this again, I've had over the past few years, so Baruch Hashem, as the years move on, so there are parents that are aware of my situation, and I've had parents call me to discuss these specific issues. And one thing I always offer, and I've done this, is I tell the parents, give the menahelis or the menal my number, and I can talk to them, because I can talk their language. So one thing you can do is, it doesn't have to be me, it could be Avi, it could be someone else that you know of that gets it. If they can communicate and understand, and it's amazing how the light bulb goes on with these principles when they realize that, oh, I didn't understand that. And this is also something. Chinuch has come a long way in the last 20 years. There are a lot of really good principles out there that really understand and want. There are a lot of them, there are some of them that are not. And when you have that difficult situation, you have to deal with it. But many of them really do want to do the right thing. And we all know that times have changed. And in regular mainstream chinuch, it's not this, it's a whole new world. And we all understand that, and I think that once we have that understanding, I think we deal with it, we can deal with it differently. What your child needs is an advocate. Someone that's in their corner. Now, a lot of times that's us. And our children have to know, no matter what, we are in their corner. We are there for them, and we will do anything for them. And a lot of our children have this mentality, and I want to talk about that for a moment, or at least very, very shortly, of why this happens, of it's me against the world. And our children have to know that we're there for them, and we're there to do anything we can for them. It also helps to have an advocate in school. I'll give you just a little bit of background. Our daughter, even though despite the fact that I am the menal, but I'm not in charge of the girls, it's a different division. Through her journey, she ended up getting kicked out of school. She was kicked out of school. It was particularly painful, obviously, because you understand, you're the menal, what's going on. Dealing with that, we had two wonderful people, one in charge of this school. One of them who was really sweet and understanding, didn't understand the whole. If I could do rewind, which Baruch Hashem we don't do, maybe I would have handled things differently. Maybe I would have sat down with them and explained to them. I myself was going through it, so it was hard to do. But Baruch Hashem, everything happens for a reason. Amechim and Tzadikav, the Rebbeinu Shem put us on this journey. There's another Menaheles who didn't understand at all. But what we did have was a few very understanding people in the school. Moros, they were mechaneches, who were a lifeline for our daughter. Lifeline. Because there was someone there that was her advocate. Someone that was only interested not in what she was learning, but who she was and what she was going through. So that's extremely important to have someone, an ally in the school, that gets your daughter, your son, etc. I'm touching on a few different topics here, and then again, I do want to open up in a few minutes. A lot of parents struggle with a child that doesn't want to go to school. They just don't want to go. They don't want to get out of bed, they don't want to go. So, something very wise that Avi always says, and again, I'm sure you've all heard this from him, if your child had 103 fever, would you send your kid to school? Would you force them and say, would you start bribing them and pleading with them? Of course not. So, of course, that's a mindset to understand that our child is a holy nefesh. There's something seriously wrong. So you have to be in tune to that. You have to listen to them because it's possible that there's a reason they don't want to go to school specifically. And there might be something that happened, there might be something, a person that's happening, and you have to listen to them. And you have to really try to be mevayer and try to ascertain exactly what is wrong. Another thing is that as parents, we have a very hard time because we had this preconceived notion in our head. We had this picture when our child was born of this is what is going to happen. Our child is going to be here, they're going to go to this school, they're going to go to that seminary, they're going to go to this yeshiva, they're going to marry this person. And some of the hardest things we have to do as parents is readjust our thinking. In my own personal situation, our daughter was asking to go to a different school, and we were not listening. Again, that's what the Rebbeinu Shem wanted. And Baruch Hashem, the journey is amazing, and it was great, but that needs Shailas Chacham. You have to ask Das Torah for this. But the main thing is not to be married to that preconceived picture that you had in your head. And again, I think all of us understand that. We have to readjust our thinking. And it's not compromising. It's understanding in the inner core of our emunah and bitachon and the Rebbeinu Shem. It's understanding that what we thought was wrong, we were wrong. And this new picture is the real picture. The one that's going to get us to where our child is supposed to be. I want to share with you, just before I get a little further, I want to just share with you a ma'aseh, because I think this is really, really also very crucial for us. Without emunah and bitachon, without understanding that every step of the way was preordained by the Rebbeinu Shem, we just heard Rabbi Shimon Russell talking about Arba'im Yom Kaidim Mitziras of Vlad. This whole thing was predestined for us to go through. So sometimes it's not unusual and it's nothing to be ashamed of. We ask the question why. We ask the question why. And something I'm going to hopefully talk about B'ez Hashem on Sunday is that we used to walk around and see other normal children and say, why? What? What did we do wrong? What could we have done better? Why is it like that? Why can't it be normal? But we understand. With Emunah, we talk, we understand that there's a picture here. There's a whole journey we're going through. So I want to share with you just this one ma'isa, which to me spoke very, very strongly to what we're going through. Reb Melech Biederman mentions a story in his over Pesach that there was a Rav in a small town near Pressburg that was doing bris milah against the government's rishus. They asked it, they did not allow him to do it, and he was doing it anyway. And one day they did a bris milah on a ger, and unfortunately the wound would not close, and this person was bleeding profusely, and the Rav had a big problem on his hands, because if he takes this person to the doctor, they're going to find out that he did the bris milah. And his own life, he wasn't worried about. But what would it do for all the people of his entire town? Who knows, even surrounding towns could be in trouble. If he doesn't take him to the doctor, and the person dies chas v'shalom, again, it's going to be a big problem. So if he takes him, it's a problem. If he doesn't, he didn't know what to do. So he went to the Chassam Sofer in Pressburg, and the Chassam Sofer told him, the only choice that you have is that you and the ger should go to the river and jump off a cliff into the river and be Moisi and Nefesh, give up your life to save all of the Yidden, all the surrounding towns. So Hakonas Nefashis to everyone, you have to be willing to jump into the river. The Rav was Mekabel Ba'ava, and the ger was Mekabel Ba'ava, and they went to the river, and before they jumped off, they said, Areini Muchan Mezumin, we're ready to do this, and suddenly a man walked by, an older man. He says, what are you doing? Well, you look like really sad. Didn't want to tell him. The man was insisting, you have to tell me what's wrong. They had told him what's going on. He said, wow, aren't you lucky? I happen to have in my bag over here a special bandage. We'll take care of this ger, we'll take care of him, and he'll be healed. So they took care of this person quickly. The Rav did what he said, and Baruch Hashem, it stopped the bleeding. Turned around, and of course the person was gone. And he understood that it was Eliyahu Hanavi that had come as a schus for his Mesiras Nefesh. So he went back to the Chassam Sofer and he says, Rebbe, if I was going to be zeicher to see Eliyahu Hanavi, why couldn't you just tell me I was going to see Eliyahu Hanavi? Why did you tell me? And obviously, I think he knew the answer before he asked the question. The Chassam Sofer told him that if you want Gili Eliyahu, if you want to see a Yeshua without Mesiras Nefesh, you can't see it. After you were willing to be Mesiras Nefesh, that's how you're zeicher to see Eliyahu Hanavi. Our children are so special. We know this. They are special neshamas. And we are zeicher to have a child that was chosen by the Rebbeinu Shalom to be unbelievably brilliant. Brilliant in every facet of their being. Not just a child that goes along with the flow, who so many do, but a child that questions, a child that is a neshama that wants and desires, and that's when they get into trouble because they are thirsting for the answers to their questions. And that's why they struggle in school, because they ask. And when they're told not to ask, they ask more. And then they get in trouble. And they resent it because all they want is the emes. And many teachers, Baruch Hashem, again, we're getting better at this, because we've taught teachers, if Rashi can say, I don't know, then we can say, I don't know. But there are many teachers who struggle with that. And they say, what kind are you asking? A chutzpah, kfira, etc., etc., etc. All the worst things possible for a child who just wants answers. Because they are, at their inner core, emes. Many of them are also black and white, and we all know this, and it's either right or wrong. It's 100% this way or 0% the other way. That's also part of the package. But at their inner core, they just want the truth. And they get knocked down and knocked down. And unfortunately, that puts them in where they are. But this is also hashgacha. That's part of what we believe in the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom does all this for a reason, because ultimately these children are going to be the light of everything. They're the leaders. As my daughter says, I was put in this position to help so many people who want to know. And she thanks to Rebbeinu Hashem every single day for the schus that she had to go through all the pain that she went through. That's where all our children are going to end up, b'siyata d'shmaya. But we also are going to see this Gili Eliyahu. We're going to see it. But in order for us to see it, we have to have Mesiras Nefesh. And I know that all of you understand what we do is Mesiras Nefesh. We give our lives, we give our soul, we give every part of our kishkes to these children. And I can be mavtiach to you that it will be reciprocated 1,000 times over. Even when they can't express it, and even when they themselves can't always see it, later on they will tell you that they appreciated it, and they were there, and they appreciate everything that we do. But we need to have that Mesiras Nefesh. That's the way Rebbeinu Hashem created the world. We just heard B'Shim and Russell. In order for a marriage to work, it needs Mesiras Nefesh. That's what Mesiras Nefesh means. Mesiras Nefesh doesn't mean willing to jump off a cliff. Mesiras Nefesh means giving over what you want for someone else. So, I think that's important. But there's also another aspect I want to talk about. I want to make sure that I have time for questions at the end. Okay, good. I'll give about 5 more minutes. I just wanted to say a couple more things. In most situations, our children who are struggling are the most brilliant, gifted, and we're doing great, and then the wheels came off. In other situations, it's because of a learning disability perhaps, but in other ways they were brilliant and gifted. Because that's what Rebbeinu Hashem creates us. Each one of us has milas and chesronos, and therefore they were gifted in some way. And all of a sudden, they struggle. And they're struggling, and these are children that they know how good they are. They know how talented they are, and it pains them to no end that they're having such a lack of hatzlacha. And it's a cycle that gets worse and worse, because the more frustrated they get, the more they act out, and the more trouble they get into, and it just makes it worse. It's really important that our children have, the Chavis HaTalmidim presents and says that a person has to have hatzlacha. A child needs to have things that they're successful at in order to feel good about themselves. In the secular world, they call it islands of competence. That's what they call it. So our children who are so gifted are suddenly struggling. So if you can find something in school where they're good at, where they can thrive, that is so very important. Let's say that situation is not possible. After meeting with the principal and discussing it, because that's really, really important, as we said, sitting down with the menahelis and talking about trying to paint the picture for them to understand where we're coming from. If it can't be in school, it should be somewhere else. It could be after school. There could be, and most of our children, these are kids who want so much to give. It's with special needs children. If they can have that little hour a day of feeling that they're successful, it pays dividends way down the road. It's so important to do. I said before, again, some people came in late. If you can't convey this, I would make it available to anyone that wants my telephone number. I'm always available to speak to administration to try to get them to understand. I had a situation 6 months ago with parents that called me. We called the menahelis. She was fantastic. Changed the whole schedule. One thing that principals struggle with, and I understand where they're coming from, is because I think we should look at it ourselves. One of the questions parents always ask is, what's it going to do to the other children in the family? If we do this, how's it going to affect our other kids? So Baruch Hashem, once you're doing TP for a long time, you realize it only helps. But for a principal, it's understandable. They're worried. What kind of hashpah is this child going to have on other people? They have a responsibility, and a lot of times behind the scenes, their parents pressuring. So we have to be sensitive to that too. But at the end of the day, we need to advocate for our child. And if our child can be in school, they should be in school. We talked about before, I have to make sure it's the right school. But if they can be in school, they should be. If they don't want to go to school, So that's a situation we have to handle on a day-to-day basis. You can't force them, like we said, but at the same time we have to be listening to them and try to encourage them as much as possible. As far as, again, going back to Shimon Russell, a husband and a wife, have to be on the same page. I can tell you, as sitting as a menal sometimes at meetings, in regular mainstream chinuch, when parents are not on the same page, it's very obvious, and the child suffers. In this situation, it's even more extreme. We have to have a united approach to what we want the menal menhelis to do. I want to finish with one thing. I recently wrote this. You may have read it. It's possible. I know that Avi sent it out. But I think this is so, again, a lot of times you see something and it talks to you. This talked to me. Also, the Mayach Biederman on Pesach wrote this as follows. He said that a lot of times we sit at the Seder and we take the Levi matzah, the middle matzah, and we break it in half and we put the bigger piece away. And a person who doesn't know the end of the story sits at the Seder and cries, oy vey, this poor piece of matzah, it's broken in half, hidden away, who knows where it is. Everyone's running around and handling it, which Hamev and Yavin, what that means, it's being handled by this person, that person, this person, that you don't know what is going to be. And a person doesn't know the Seif Maisa, doesn't know the end of the story, can feel bad for this poor piece of Afikaiman, what's going on. What happens at the end, Afikaiman comes back to the Seder. It's the most chush of all the matzahs. It's Zechla Korban Pesach, it's the last thing we eat. It's the thing that stays with us for an entire year. So I thought, isn't this exactly what we go through? Our biggest piece, our most precious child, is broken, taken away. It's not leading a normal life. Isolated. Who knows who has it? But at the end of the day, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, Siyata Dishmaya, what's going to be is this piece, this child is going to be the most chashuv of all. The one that's going to light the way for everyone else. But Mayach Biederman says, what happens? Everyone gets presents from the Afikaiman. These children, these precious, precious neshamas, give all of us the greatest gift. And I have thanked my daughter over and over and over again for giving us this matana of being able to become better people, to understand other people better. Our children all grew from this incredible journey. Each one of them is a better person because of it. And the bracha is that all of us should understand it's so painful along the way. But we know that from pain comes growth. And from growth comes the ultimate Yeshua. So it's painful, it's difficult, understandably. But the Rebbeinu should bench each and every one of it, just like we saw our Yeshua, the Rebbeinu should bench each one of it. Also, you'll see your Yeshua as well. And along the way, we have to make that hishtadlus, to fight for our children, to believe in our children, to accept our children, to love our children, not despite, as Reb Shimon Russell said, not despite, but because of what they're going through. How brave are our children that are putting up with so much pain and so much suffering, and they get up and they work and they try, and failure after failure, but they're continuing to go because that's who they are. So we have to be makar that and appreciate that, and the Rebbeinu should bench us all with tremendous Yeshuas. Now I'll take some questions, perhaps 1 second. Just okay. Go ahead. Because you asked me before, so yeah. She's not happy in school. Yeah. Okay.
Basically, we belong to that Hasidus.
Mm-hmm.
She's in that school.
Right.
But at the end of the day, she doesn't feel like she has any connection to this Hasidus. She's a full Arab girl.
Mm-hmm.
She's not that style, and she's literally not ready for the end of the year. This year, and for sure not taking a run back next year.
Okay.
So I'm working already behind to change the school. But my question is, I know we have to listen to them, but can't we just like make them or beg them? Can we just like continue another 1 year and then maybe we'll think of a seminary? She does not want to hear. I mean, in fact, this week she missed a day or two already because she can't even like go anymore. She she almost hates everybody. She really hates. Sad. I told her the whole Yiddish and the Shem was like, why do you hate them? Like, both their Hasidish, whatever, my Hasidus. She really, and I wonder, I have Rahmanis on her. I understand her. I'm working on behalf of her, not maybe as strong as I should have, but I'm trying my best. I'm doing it in a very slow way. And just don't know.
Why are you so insistent that she should finish up one more year? Why?
She cannot drop out.
What?
She cannot drop out.
And another school is not an option?
In the middle of, we're talking about another 6 weeks.
Oh, you're talking about just for the rest of this year, you're saying?
Yeah, next
Okay.
year I'm not begging her to.
Okay.
I would love it.
Mhm.
Because she will be another grade older. I can think of seminaries. After love me great, I can already think of seminaries. But
Right.
she does not. And there is nothing, I live in Moscow, there is nothing that I could really touch that you can do on the scale that we would like to.
Right. So you're talking about the last 6 weeks of school. That's what the question is.
It's two things really. It's this year, how to push her, and then obviously about next year.
So we talked about listening, right? You have to find out why she doesn't want. Is it just because she doesn't like the teacher, she doesn't like, or is it something deeper than that?
Doesn't like it.
There's nothing deeper. Yeah, so that's what you have to be. That's the number one thing you have to be wary of. Is there any deep reason why she doesn't want to be there? If there is, then you can't.
So I know the reason. The reason is she doesn't like that Hasidus, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're very flat, very not understanding, very judgmental. Probably not everyone, but a good,
Right.
And she is very trained to us how to, not judge people, accept people that are totally different than us because of our kid and the situation at home.
Mm-hmm.
And this opened her mind, and she just does not like them. She just like, and she's so hates them. It's very sad.
Let's play the other end. What happens if she doesn't go back to school for 6 weeks? What happens?
It's very bad.
Because of what people will say, because of...
Basically, more or less, and I don't want her to start. And I also told her, as much as I hear from other people, that I feel like I do have to put down my foot a little bit. You understand what I'm saying? Like letting a child, she's not a kid.
Right.
She's not a kid that I have to just let her do whatever she wants.
Right.
And she realizes that she has 2 friends that wanted to change schools,
Mm-hmm.
and sadly ended up a big tip.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to happen.
Right. So I don't know your daughter. So I'm asked this again. Anyway, I always tell people like they have the Ted Newman, the round table chinuch discussions. It's very superficial because unless you know the situation, you can't really answer a shayla. It's not possible. So not knowing your daughter, I can't really answer the shayla. But I just want to say is this: you have to be darish v'chayker yourself to make sure that you have no negias, that you have to take yourself out of it, make sure there's nothing to do with what you want and what your daughter wants. Because
The years that I wanted to be successful.
no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is if we're worried about when we make a decision about our child, we have to make sure that it's not because of what it will look like because of us, but because of the child. That's what I'm saying. It's very important because we're all nagei b'davar. We have to be, but we have to make sure that the decision we make is in the child's best interest. Not a kip. So then a regular chinuch, yes, that you could assist. She finishes in 6 weeks. Bribe her if you need to. There's nothing wrong with that. And once that's for Shmuel Kamenetsky, once about bribing, and he says if you can afford it, do it. There's nothing wrong with that. Give the money, whatever it is, no problem at all. He says, if I have the money, I bribe every kid in my yeshiva, he told me. So there's nothing wrong with that. If it's a regular child, you can insist, you can bribe, and finish the 6 weeks. But just to make sure that you dot all the I's, to make sure that you, the Darish Chayka, really analyze it, to make sure that it's a regular, normal, typical situation, just because of what it is, and you can, and also be empathetic. I understand what you're going through. If I had to do this, I would also suffer, but it's 6 weeks. It's 6 weeks. We can do this together, and every day she comes home, we appreciate what she's doing, but yeah, if that's the situation, I would say 100%. Yes, Mr. Lynn?
So when I was growing up, my parents always would say, teacher's always right.
Right.
Teacher's always right.
Yes.
First. And now let's talk about it.
Right.
So you're saying if a child comes home and complains about a teacher, you no longer say teacher's always right, you say I think you're right, and I stand by on your side? What's the general approach to this?
It's a very good question.
Area?
Okay. So, what I would say is as follows. 100%, I think we all grew up with that. I found out years later that my mother would always would make the phone call. They didn't even tell us that they did it. Because in those days, we were growing up, it is what it was. You had to deal with it. A child does need to know that you listen to them. So the first thing is you sit and listen to exactly what happened. The first words out of your mouth shouldn't be the Rebbe is right. The first words out of your mouth is, Shefela, tell me exactly what happened. Just tell me what happened. The empathy is real. It has to be real. It can't be fake. It has to be real. I really feel it. But one thing we have to understand is, and there's nothing wrong with saying this, is that the Rebbe or the Mori are human beings. They're human beings. It's possible they made a mistake. It's very possible. That's not pogeya in the kavod of the Rav, of the Rebbe. It's not. And hopefully, again, this is something we're trying to educate our Rebbeim and Moros to say, we made a mistake. I'm sorry. Those two words are the most empowering words. They're not weakness, it's strength. And children respect strength. So you could have that conversation and say, it's possible there was a mistake made. It's possible. This is what we're going to do. Okay? I'm going to call the Rebbe, the Mor, I'm going to call, and I'm going to have a conversation with them. But one thing we have to understand is that even when a Rebbe or Mor makes a mistake, we don't lose our derech eretz. We still maintain our respect because that's the position of authority. That's with the other, especially if we're talking about Rebbe and Mor, there are, shluchei derachmana, so we have to respect that. But I think it's important that the child understands that you have their back, you understand where they're coming from, and you will deal with it. At the end of the day, sometimes they're wrong, and they could be wrong too. But yes, I don't think there's anything wrong with approaching it that way. Yes?
You mentioned the point about how many kids are left with unanswered questions when they're seeking the truth.
Yes.
So a lot of those kids tend to go off the derech or have a lot of rebellious feeling.
Yeah.
Post going through a trauma like that.
Sure.
So how would you say is the best way to initiate a way where we can educate the masses through Q&As? Like some people have a program where they do an Ask the Rabbi type.
Right.
Question.
More and more schools are doing that. I think what you have to be careful about that is because you have to make sure the person who's doing it has to have two qualities. Number one is confidentiality. The children can't be afraid that the question they ask is going to get back to the Menal Menahelis. The Menal Menahelis have to appreciate the fact that they're not going to know who asked the question. A lot of schools, they want to do the right thing, but then they'll come back to the child and say, we heard you ask this question, and the kid's shattered. They're never going to ask again, and then it's too late. Or it'll take years to repair the damage. So you have to make sure that it has to be a person who will be confidential, has the ability to do that, to tell the principal, I'm not telling you who asked what. This is a time for the kids to be able to ask. Also have to be a person who's honest, obviously qualified to answer the questions, honest, and also that relates to the kids. Because the kids need to know that they can relate to that person to ask. So those are very important qualities. More and more schools are doing it, and if it's done right, it's a fantastic approach.
Part of the curriculum or as an extra activity? I think it should be essential in every
And some schools do it like once a month. Some schools bring someone in, which is also helpful, but it has to be 100%. Yeah, I think we're getting there. We're definitely getting there because children they just want to know.
I went through that in elementary school, and I was
painful.
put down because I had those questions that were irregular to ask in an ultra-Orthodox yeshiva.
Right, and you really just wanted the truth. You weren't doing anything wrong. You just wanted.
Like I was wrong because they thought it was from a bad place, from a rebellious standpoint, but it was just misinformation. Right.
We're starting to get that now. And Mitzvah Hashem, let's hope we can all fix that. But yes, that's what has to happen. The kids need to be able to ask. And it's not a problem what other kids are hearing.
Has the answers. They're not hiding anything.
100%. We shouldn't be embarrassed. And there's nothing wrong with saying, it's a great question, I'll get back to you tomorrow. We all do that. The person asks a question on B'Kiv Eger, can't say, I'll get back tomorrow. Same things. We can ashkaf, we can do the same thing. Yes?
I have a kid that's 17. My next one's 12, not the boy, after that. And it was very painful to see, for my 12-year-old to see what happened with my 17-year-old, to see his older brother go from being like Kashima, Bachar, Yeshiva, to not being from like all.
Right.
And so he's going through his own hard time. He's upset by what he saw. He saw my son was bullied, and he's seen the boys drop off. Now they feel bad, so they drop off notes, apology notes, and that hurts him. So he's having his own struggle, and it's stuff going working out. It's hard for him to get up in the morning.
Your 12-year-old.
My 12-year-old. So the menachel gets really like upset that he comes late, and he's like, what should I do about this? And he wants to do something about it, but we live in a different world now.
Yes,
where
right.
We're much more open and understanding
Mhm,
of things,
mhm.
and we're just like focused on the fact that he comes to school, and that he's learning, and he's there until the end of the day. So if he's coming, and so when my son says to me, I'm not lazy, I just can't. That's what my 12-year-old says.
Right.
But the principal, yesterday I got a call, today I got a call, and he's just not getting it.
Right. So some of the things that we talked about earlier will be very helpful to sit down, because again, where he's coming from, where this manal is coming from, he doesn't understand.
Yeah, but as a manal, like I understand him, like he can't have a free for all
Right.
of the kids, coming whenever he wants, an hour late now, 15 minutes late every single day. So how does, as like I understand where the manal's coming from. He says he can't have it. So how do we do this?
You know,
We have to
again,
be our son's advocate.
Yes, you do.
We know where our son is coming from.
right.
And then we understand also the manal. Like he has to.
So in most situations, like for example, again, and this is like such a typical example, if a child was ill and had to go to the hospital every morning for treatment, would the manal be afraid of what is going to affect the other children? Of course not, because everyone understands that. Most situations, other children do not look at a kid coming late and say, oh, I think I'm going to do the same thing. They won't. But a manal scared, it's a fear, but it's not usually an unrealistic one. It's an unrealistic fear. Throughout Bria Yisrael, there's always been kids who come early, come late, that's the way it is. I think that the manal has to understand the depth of why it's so important not to alienate your son. He has to understand that we're dealing with something which is very serious, and the more he understands that, the better off we'll be. And again, this is one of the situations where I would have no problem conversing with this minahal. Hopefully, again, I don't know, when it comes to, I'm not so bakant with the Hasidic Oilam, with Litvish Oilam, those minahal, I know most of them. But I think that it's more the minahal trying to do his job, but his job also is to make sure that your son is taken care of in the right way. And forcing him to come is not going to help. And in most situations, it will not affect anyone else.
Everybody else has attention. If he doesn't have attention, that shouldn't be a problem.
No. You could. I always tell my Talmidim, you don't understand. A lot of times the Talmidim will say, why didn't I get this? And you don't know what other things are in place. You don't know which other consequences or not consequences. So I tell each child is different. I said, if you walk past the hospital room, I tell my Talmidim this all the time, and you see this person getting a shot, and you're getting a shot and that one's not getting a shot, you wouldn't ask such a question, because you understand that every person is every child is different, and if a child does want to know from the now, we're doing other things with this Talmud. We're doing other things, and it's no one's business. But again, you know what's important, and you know how critical this is, and you have to, in any way you can, convey it to the Benal. Okay. Thank you very much. A good Erev Shabbos. Shkoyach.